I think I came in to being a creative leader thinking that being a creative director or in that type of role, that meant that I came up with the ideas. I was the idea guy, and then the other people executed my ideas. And I learned pretty quickly that that doesn't work, and no one likes to work that way.
Hey, what's up, people? It's Brandon Ferris, and you're listening to A Quick Read, an advertising podcast that talks book smarts and street smarts with the people who have been there, done that. Today's guest is creative leader and producer Dave Markey. He's created thrills for Cedar Point and brushed elbows with the Avengers. We jump in the cage with herding tigers and talk creative leadership. You know what to do. Tune in and turn up. What's up, Dave Markey?
Brandon, long time, man. It's been a while.
It has been a long time. Wow. So long that I've got to tell the listeners, you, my friend, taught me how to edit.
Oh, I did?
Yeah, man. Back in the day, we were at our first shop here in Cincinnati, and we were working on this little, editorial news show. And I got hired at the time. I only knew iMovie, and basically the producer said, "We can teach you how to cut on Final Cut."
Yeah.
And I went down into the basement, into this dark room, and there you were, and you said, "Okay, here's how it works." And you showed me Final Cut, and I think we had maybe 5 or 6 sessions, and then you were like, "All right, the show's yours."
I do remember that. It was amazing, and it was before you ever showed up. The president of the company came to me and he said, "I've got this guy Brandon. He's made some documentaries and iMovie and it was kind of this like, this guy doesn't know anything, but he's got potential, and I like him," was kind of how he was pitched to me, and I was like, okay, like let's see what happens, you know. And,
so there was the first instance where you were handed a creative, which kind of brings us to today's conversation. You chose a book called Herding Tigers by Todd Henry. It's all about how to lead creative teams. Tell me about why you chose that book.
Right. So I was in the position where I had been a maker for over 10 years of my career, and I'd led teams in little short spurts. For a shoot here or a shoot there, maybe it's 1 day or 2 days. But then I was working at Cedar Fair full time, and I was promoted to leading the whole department. And so I felt like I needed some more knowledge and skills on how to go from being a maker to leading a team of other makers day in and day out, because it is definitely a very different skill.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so this book, I think, has a lot of great content around that, which we'll jump into. But before we do that, let's, rewind the clock a little bit. So, you've always been in production as sort of a video editor, a DP, filmmaker, producer, that sort of a thing. Talk a little bit about those early years, because after I worked with you and you were mainly an editor, you kind of left and went off into sort of the film world where you did a lot of stuff with major motion pictures. So talk a little bit about that and then kind of take us from there up to speed. And I believe you used to hang out with the Avengers?
I did hang out with some Avengers here and there. I hung out with a few of them, Nick Fury and Black Widow and Captain America, all
nice.
Have been a part of my career. So yeah, when we met, I was editing. I had my TV show, and you had your TV show, and we would come in every week and bang out episodes in the editing room. And in addition to that, though, that was just a part-time thing for me. I was also going out on sets and working as just a grip carrying sandbags. And then I had my own clients for whom I would DP, or even produce and direct the whole thing. So I was kind of running up and down the whole ladder of
Gotcha.
production. And maybe that wasn't the smartest career move. I think a more business minded person would say, just focus on the producing, directing, those head honcho roles, and stop doing this technician stuff. But
Gotcha.
yeah, I enjoyed the technician stuff, and it gave me the opportunity to do stuff like go and work on the Avengers and go and work on Captain America, Winter Soldier, and a few other movies. Which if my only title was producer, you don't get those opportunities. So I kept doing it as a way to get visibility into bigger and more complex things.
Yeah, and so for those listeners that aren't familiar with the film industry, like us filmmakers, a grip, really you have departments within the film world, and one of those is you hear people say the term grip and electric, and so electric is typically people that are dealing with lights and power and those types of things, and grip is really more about shaping the light. So it's building rigs and working with different teams, camera department to sort of like set things up. So in your case, as a grip, you mentioned you were doing setups for I think you said to me at one point you were blowing up Nick Fury's car.
We did. Now, so technically the effects department does the blowing up.
Yeah.
But
right.
the as the grip department, it was our job to rig the cameras to the cars that get blown up.
Yeah. Gotcha. So again, you're working with all these different people. You're sort of hands-on. So you're used to being on a team kind of like on the front lines, right? So you were sort of like you're out there, you're working, you're part of this sort of army of one. And then as you started to then shift and then you found your place with Cedar Fair, you were now more of like maybe the coach on the field of the sidelines?
So I started off as post-production supervisor there. So I was editing was my main function, but I also had producing responsibilities and writing responsibilities. That department was a brand new department. We started with 3 people. So we had Howard Newstate was executive producer. I was post-production supervisor was the title that just we kind of fell into. And then we had JJ Painter as the motion graphics artist. And we started on a folding table with our personal laptops in what they call the birthday room at Kings Island.
Okay.
That's how that department started.
Wow, that is a great story, right? The birthday room. So I think that's really interesting, right? Because again, you were as a freelancer, you've been doing lots of different things. You've been on major motion pictures. You were editing a local business television show. You were doing all sorts of things, directing your own sort of stuff. I believe you were the director of photography, if I'm correct, on my first role as director for a commercial for a local potato chip company.
That's right. And actually,
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this, but you and the president of that company came to me and said, you had the script, I believe, and you had pitched it to the client and they had bought into it, and you guys came to me and said, "Dave, do you want to direct this?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Brandon, you've written the script, you did the storyboards, you already know the actors, you've done 80% of the directing stuff. As much as my dream was to direct, I was like, you should direct it. And I'll be the director of photography and I'll help you with any little, advice that you need along the way, but this is your baby already." So
yeah, we'll have to, if I can find on YouTube, let's see if I can post some of that stuff in the show notes. I think one of the first the big idea was these barbecue chips are so good that you'll do things that you normally wouldn't. And so you had like a guy sitting on a couch with his English bulldog and he's eating his chips. He's got sort of like the barbecue dust or like the Cheetos dust all over his fingers. And then we cut to the tight shot of the bulldog licking his fingers. Then the guy sort of looks at his hand and contemplates this moment of like, okay, this dog just licked my fingers, but there's still some barbecue dust on my fingers. And these chips are so good that it's worth licking my fingers. So it was a simple sort of probably a cliche concept, but it was a lot of fun. And that was, that was a big deal for me, man. That was like sort of my first big break. It's so funny now that we're talking about all this, like you're the most influential person in my career.
No way.
You taught me to edit. You taught me to direct.
I do remember we got there on set and for that first thing, and we said, like, I said something like, how about you guys rehearse? We'll block your actors, then I'll light it, and then we'll shoot it. And you're like, cool, great. All right, we'll do that. And then you like whispered to me, what's blocking? And and it was a lot of fun though. And if I remember right, it was so loose and we were able to just work so fluidly and improvisationally. I think we came up with one of the commercial ideas right there on set. Like,
yeah, for sure.
We didn't write it out. We didn't script it. We just said, what if one of the chips gets stepped on and this guy starts crying?
Yeah.
So
no, and I think that brings us, this part of the conversation I think is perfect to set up one of the first big ideas from the book, which is good leadership means helping the team reach its full potential, and you've definitely done that for me and projects that we've worked on in the past. So, how is that fleshed out in your career, whether it's, working on set with a film crew or, building this sort of, production department at an amusement park? What does it mean to help a team reach its full potential?
I think it's about, I often think of sandboxes and this idea that every creative kind of needs their own sandbox. I think I came in to being a creative leader thinking that being a creative director or in that type of role, that meant that I came up with the ideas. I was the idea guy, and then the other people executed my ideas. And I learned pretty quickly that doesn't work, and no one likes to work that way. It's much as I read books like Todd Henry's book and some other thinking in that area. I started to play with the idea that I was more the shepherd of ideas rather than the creator of ideas. So you have this team of people, let them generate ideas and just help them curate them, help steer them towards the projects and the roles that are best suited for their strengths. And I think that's what that means, because it very quickly, even on a small team in a small operation, it's very quickly too much for one person to be the idea person. Yeah. And you get better stuff. You get more people working on it, and they're going to put way more energy into it if they feel like they have a piece of it.
That's great. Do you have a memory of maybe a project where that just worked really well, where you were able to sort of be that shepherd and really, hit a home run, maybe something from, the amusement park? I mean, what is that even like? What kind of stuff are you guys making? What's an example of you helping a team create a moment in a amusement franchise?
Yeah, I think that the one that comes to mind for me is when Kings Island launched their Mystic Timbers roller coaster, and this
a big deal here in the Midwest.
Yes, anytime you get a new roller coaster, it's a big deal, and it's a lot of pressure on the business because this big investment is meant to bring more people to your park, and so you're expected to have great numbers when you get that kind of investment. And so we were charged with helping with the announcement of that project. And what that meant was there was a big press event, and then they have some video projection where they tease the ride, they go into the features of the new ride and get everyone excited for what's coming next season. So we had started making these teaser videos for each ride. And it's kind of like brings you into the storyline of it and gets people excited for it. the other element that everyone gets excited for is the POV footage, which looks like you're riding on the ride.
Yeah, everybody wants that.
Everyone wants that. And for the creative team, there isn't as much work there because if the ride is what it is, and it's just a single render of there's not even multiple shots. There's no edits.
Is that all 3D or is that live action?
Yeah. Well, it's 3D because at the point that you're announcing the ride hasn't been built yet.
Gotcha.
So you have to, and that's the challenge. That's one of the really interesting challenges with working with amusement parks is we're constantly promoting things that didn't exist yet. We had to do that for the Grand Carnival Street Festival. It was brand new. It was coming to Kings Island. They hadn't had the festival before. So what footage do you show to show people that there's going to be a really great, cool festival coming to the amusement park? So then you get into like, okay, do we stage it? And then how many actors do we have to bring in to stage it?
Yeah.
And the park.
Yeah, if you're gonna sell a carnival parade, how do you fake that one?
It sounds like you need hundreds of people, right? And then the amusement park is open 7 days a week from 10 in the morning until at least 11 at night. So when do you get into the park to film it? So you get a lot of fun challenges like that. But I think with Mystic Timbers, that was my first year from when I had moved from being a post-production supervisor to being associate creative director and having more of a leadership role. And so I really wanted to make my mark with this Mystic Timbers announcement video. And it was myself and Phil Grosvenor, the motion graphic artist. And I just remember us being in the office at 3 a.m. We were gorging ourselves on Hershey's candy because they were a sponsor, and just rendering and editing and re-editing, re-rendering, composing the music, and just trying to go all out on this thing. And
is this happening in the birthday room?
No. So the birthday room was where we started while the facility was being built for this new department. So we were in the birthday room for about 3 or 4 months, and then we got a really cool facility with a lot of digital technology and
awesome.
And a big server that all of our editing stations were connected to.
That's great. That's awesome, man. So you're able to sort of like, bring about this launch event, get the team excited, deliver, you burn the midnight oil, you hit the marks. Afterwards, everybody's sort of excited, relieved, the whole nine. And I think this brings me to the next theme in his book, where he really starts to call out and dispel some myths about creatives. So, after going through an experience like that with your team, you learn a lot about each other, Yeah. And so some of the myths that he talks about are, for instance, the myth that creatives want total freedom. Or the myth that creatives lack business and analytical skills. So, what are those types of myths that you've seen in the book that seem to stand out to be more prominent than the others that you've said, you know what, I've worked with creatives long enough now, this is just not true?
Yeah, I think that the myth about creatives wanting total freedom is absolutely a myth. A little bit of direction and a little bit of boundaries is much more inspiring. The blank canvas, for me, for sure, it creates anxiety because you could go just about anywhere. Has that been your experience? Is the blank canvas? Is that?
Yeah, I think that, as much as creatives want to feel like anything is possible, they hate it. I feel like, my team loves a deadline and a strong creative brief.
Yes.
Give them a deadline and a brief, and man, you'll get amazing work. People will come up with stuff that you never could have thought of. If you give them no deadline and no creative direction, wow, it can get dark. People start to get into the dark places.
Yes. Well, and that was something that Cedar Fair was an interesting exposure to as well, because a lot of these projects were things that we generated ourselves. And so we didn't necessarily have a deadline. Sometimes we had really hard deadlines, like when you have a big press event scheduled, in the case of that Mystic Timbers video. But other times it's, we have an idea for a show and we're going to start doing it. And if we don't deliver it, there's no, there was no hard deadline. And that's actually a lot harder in some ways, because then you think you finish, but you can also be the one to decide, no, it needs to be a little better. And then it can drag on forever. And then you feel like you never get that satisfaction of, we did it. So the total freedom thing is anxiety inducing and exhausting, rather than inspiring.
Yeah. And I think your comment there about, a little bit better, like that can drive you crazy.
Yes.
Like at some point you have to ship the work, you have to,
yes.
At some point it has to set sail and it has to, it has to go meet the world. And then, you learn from it, is it good? Is it bad? Can we tweak it? Can we republish it? Can we re-release it 2.0, whatever? But at some point, the idea has to go. Otherwise, I think everybody just starts to get frustrated because they're just working on this thing that, never is going to fly.
Exactly. And I think that something that I've realized is you don't learn as much during a project as you learn between projects. So
that's interesting.
Doing episodes, you don't learn as much while you're creating episode 1. You ship episode 1, you kind of recharge, you rethink, and then when you go into episode 2, that's the space where you actually learn, is when you have a little time to reflect. And you never get there if you're just constantly polishing the same thing.
Wow, that was good. I like that. Yeah, that is so true, man, because I've experienced that in my career and in the projects I've worked on. I mean, it's the in-between where the magic happens, right? That reflection period. Why do you think that is? Why is it? Just because when you're in it, you're just axis to the grind, or whatever that saying is, and you just don't have time to really apply any of the learnings?
I think so. And then a lot of the learnings as to whether the piece landed or not, I mean, content relies on an audience. So you have to see how the audience responds. And you have to see, especially in the case of advertising, what the analytics look like. And then from there, you can see whether you hit the mark, whether the piece, you got a good rate of return on the effort that went into it. Because it's amazing to me the times that a piece that we put our blood, sweat, and tears into doesn't perform as well as something that was actually much, much simpler and could be produced much more efficiently. But you don't get that you get that learning upon analyzing it later.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that points out another one of these myths, right? That creatives only care about things that are cool. And what you just said there is that, sometimes after the fact, you realize that maybe the thing that's less cool is actually what's right for the job. Have you found that to be true? And do you see that the creatives you work with care more about creating a cool thing, or are you seeing a trend where creative teams now are really starting to be more strategic?
I think that so it's interesting. I came out of film school, and we all were this kind of stereotypical art school students who would gather around a table with our professors and debate what good and bad is, debate what is art and what is not art.
Sure.
All this highly
talk about David Lynch films.
Yeah, or even David Lynch was mainstream compared to some of the weird stuff that we were getting into.
Yeah.
And there was a part of me that, as much as I enjoyed film school, that sort of navel gazing, overly theoretical stuff was. You start chasing your tail after a while, and I was surprised when I got out into the world and started working on commercial content that I got a lot of satisfaction when a business owner said, "Hey, that campaign you made for me doubled my business last year." and I'm
There you
expanding
go.
my facility and I'm hiring new people because of what you made. Those are things that some film professor can't debate you out of whether it's good or bad. It's like you had
Yeah.
a tangible impact on people's lives, and I think that's interesting.
Yeah, that's really, again, that's something that you don't learn until you get into this side of the business, because the film side of the business, oftentimes, and I don't know what your experience was, but you're just not close enough to the business to really get that feedback, like on a film or whatnot. I mean, you're one of many people on an army who is executing orders, right? Because in film world, we follow our orders, and that's how we were able to ship a film and wrap in 30 days or whatever it is. And so you don't, maybe unless you're an executive producer, you don't really see that side of things. But in the commercial world, when you are the executive producer, you are the director, you are the editor, you really get to see that impact.
For sure. And yeah, I think that in the movie world, I guess it would be the development team, who, if you're a grip like me, you never interact with those people.
Yeah.
And so there is that sort of element of it, and they're on really big teams, really long timelines, very complex operation. And what's interesting about commercials is that all of that is shorter, smaller, more compressed. So you get to, you just get a more interesting interaction with it that way.
Yeah. One of the things that it makes me think of is the last myth I'll bring up, which is this idea that creatives are unreliable and lose interest easily. Have you found that to be true with your teams? Do you see a group who is ready to move on to the next thing, or what seems to keep them sort of engaged?
I think that a lot of these myths are true for people that tend to be creative. Where I think they're untrue is for people that make a living with creativity. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you've gotten to the point that you're making a living at this, your full-time job is you're a graphic designer or a copywriter or something along those lines, you're at the top, right? Like you're in that you're in the top 1% probably of creative people. Um, but I think that things like that, people are unreliable and lose interest easily. I also had a experience in playing live music, and I met a lot of musicians, and yes, there was a lot of unreliable musicians who lose interest easily.
Yeah.
But what's the difference? I think the difference is, these were hobby projects, garage bands, and I don't mean that to like uh, belittle the impact or creativity of them, because I some of my favorite music comes out of that. But I think that when you're relying on something to pay your bills and put food on your table, you can't afford to be unreliable. You can't afford to lose interest, and you have to learn business skills and analytical skills. And you learn to check your ego at the door quickly.
Mm.
So that's what I've seen. I mean,
Yeah.
I was talking to someone the other day, and they were uh, assessing me for an opportunity, and talking about how, well, creative people, often they get they very attached to their ideas, and she was trying to get to the point of like, can you take constructive criticism? And I could not be in this. I could not be making a living at this for over a decade if I couldn't do that.
Yeah. I think the answer to that is I am built on failure. Like, as creatives and as filmmakers, it's like, yeah, of course, 90% of our ideas and what we want to do is shot down by someone
Right.
or the client like,
Yep.
oh, like, yeah, I like what you're doing, but do it totally different and not do it, and then do this other thing. And you're like, oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's the school of hard knocks for sure, and I think film
Yeah.
school and the critique process in film school of having your work shown in front of all your peers and then criticized publicly
Yeah.
is good for building up that thick skin. For some people, for other people, it's not a good. thing.
Yeah, unfortunately, my children have gotten the school of hard knocks. Like they'll come to me and they'll be like, "Hey, Dad, look at this paper I wrote for school," and like it's so instinctive for me to just like help them make it better.
Copy edit
and then I
them.
have to realize, I have to realize like, oh, they're just kids.
Yeah.
They don't know, they haven't had the years of like, suppression and beat down, to weather the storm and be calloused and make it a positive experience. Because now I love it. I love critique. I love criticism. I'll tell people, hey, tear this apart. Tell me it sucks. Because I know on the other side of it is something that's going to be much better. But that's something that takes time to learn.
For sure.
When talking about what we're talking about there with stability and unreliability and losing interest, it brings me to sort of the last big idea that I want to bring up about the book. Is he talks about two things that creative teams need: stability and challenges. And probably one of the most powerful things of Todd Henry's book, Herding Tigers, is he creates this sort of chart or grid. I know there's a name for that chart. It's basically you make an X and then you have a quadrants.
Yeah.
And you plot these sort of quadrants. And the plotting lines are stability and challenges. And so in the book, he draws it out where teams without stability get frustrated and angry. Teams without challenges get bored or even depressed. And so it's about finding that sweet spot where they are challenged, but they feel stable in their creative relationship. They don't feel like you're, out to get them. You have their support. And I just really think that's really powerful. It's one of the most powerful things I got from the book. Did you get that same sense? And as you worked with your teams and even now as you're collaborating with others from a freelance perspective, how do you try to foster that balance of stability and challenge?
Definitely. I think I've definitely found it to be true. And I think when you're on a creative team and things don't feel right, and the thing to do is to think about that framework, and what's missing or what is maybe in too much abundance is the stability or the challenges. There's so many like cogs in the machine of a creative team that it can be overwhelming to figure out when something's wrong, what it could be. But I've found that if the team is not thriving, maybe it's because there's not enough stability, right? Maybe they're things are too unpredictable as far as deadlines and projects and whether projects are successful or not, and what people's assessment of their work is going to be. That can be very disorienting when you present work and you never know if you're going to get dinged on whether someone likes that color or not, or whether someone likes the font or not, or whether they're going to barely look at it and say it's good and approve it. So a lack of stability can really be frustrating in that regard. On the other hand, I can look back now and see points at which folks that I was coaching and mentoring were kind of saying, I feel a bit lost, and I feel a bit, they were looking for something in the work, and I wasn't sure what to give them, because it's much easier when someone says, I want X, and then I can work on getting them X, or talking about why I can or can't do that. But when they're kind of like, I don't know what I want, I can see now, like looking back at the book, like, oh, they weren't challenged enough. They were looking for challenges, and it was my job as the leader to find them. And in some cases, I was able to do that. In other cases, I was too caught up in my own, missions or whatever to kind of realize that, oh, that's what they need, and I can come up with this for them. We can work together, get them the challenges they need so that they feel like they're growing.
Man, that was great. Some great insight there. Yeah, I think it's really important to, as people become aware of these things, they can really become more, dynamic leaders. as someone who's been on both sides, right? So someone who's been a part of dynamic teams like film crews and production companies as sort of a team player, and then someone who's been able to, be a part of leadership positions, who's sort of led those teams. I guess, compare and contrast, or what's the one truth, or what's the thing that you're like, what, as a team member, I always really appreciated this, and therefore, as a leader, I tried to do that.
Yes, I think it's interesting because working up and down the ladder, working on both sides of it, like you said, I did have to work in that hierarchical film set world where you just do what you're told, and you do it the way that you're told. Especially as a technician, there isn't, no one's interested in your artistic way of setting up an HMI light. Like, there's a right and a wrong way to do it. But I what I found in that part of my career was that I needed to get out and do my own projects to have my own creative fulfillment. So that's when I started shooting music videos for bands that I liked and for my own band. And that was my creative outlet. And that allowed me to, when I was on the job working on a commercial for some product that I maybe didn't necessarily care about, but I was just there to, set up lights and collect a check. I could look forward to knowing I'm going to scratch my creative itch out on this project that I'm going to shoot this weekend. And I think that you can see that, unfortunately, you see some crew members that they're the frustrated director, or they're the cinematographer that never quite made it, but they're stuck in some role kind of below their abilities. And it's a bad scene for everyone. They're frustrated, and then they drive everyone around them nuts. So I think having something that you're excited about, having that sandbox to play in, is important. If you're a maker and the job that's paying the bills isn't that sandbox, then you've got to find it outside of the job. And if you're a leader, I think finding sandboxes for your people and protecting them definitely leads to a happier, more energized team.
Man, that was great. There's the soundbite right there. That was beautiful.
Thanks, man.
I totally agree, man. I try to, with my teams, look for the things they're passionate about and the opportunities, and say, hey, let's do this little side project, or let's try this little thing, or hey, let's experiment here and see if we can add a new capability, or let's see if we can, create something that we can sell a client. So I think that's just great insight. I love that. Man, this has been such a good conversation, man. You're just like, I don't know, man. You're my Obi-Wan, man. I love talking with you, Dave. So tell me what's next for you. So let's get into a little bit. You've recently moved from Cincinnati. You're now in Boston.
That's right.
You've headed out that way.
Yep.
And I believe, I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but I think you've got a big thing that just happened in your life.
I did. I just got engaged on a couple days ago. So
congratulations.
Thank you. That was my own marketing effort, my own creative campaign. And it went well, and everyone's super excited.
It worked.
Yeah.
That's good to hear that it went well. You got good metrics out of it.
I did. So, it was a long time in the making. It was a long time in the making. But
the deadline was opening.
It was. It absolutely was. I really appreciate the fact she never pressured me. She never dropped hints or any of that. So I just things lined up, and it made sense when it made
awesome.
sense.
So now you're in Boston. Are you hanging out with the Wahlbergs or anything? Aren't they from Boston?
They are.
Are you? So what are you doing in Boston, man? Like how let's hear about where you're at now. So you've done the film thing, you've done work for a major amusement park and lead a team thing, and now you're you're sort of exploring a new realm. You've got all this experience and you're ready to share it. So what's the next play?
Yeah. So what brought us to Boston was Julia, my fiance's career. She just finished her PhD in clinical psychology, and so that requires a lot of flexibility. And we were able to steer that, or she was able to steer that, to get her back to Boston. This is where she grew up. So now we're back near her family, which is really great for her. She was really not enjoying being away from them for so long while she was in grad school.
Yeah.
And I came along for the ride. I was at that fork in the road where I had the interesting creative job with Cedar Fair, and then I had this woman that I was in love with, and I had to kind of pick, right? And
Yeah.
there were ways to kind of try to have a foot on in each road. If we did the long distance thing while she was doing her internships and stuff, and I was, working from Cincinnati but visiting as much as possible, considered that. Didn't seem like a good idea. And I think that moving out of Ohio was kind of on my bucket list, and I was going to feel like something was undone in my life if I never did that. So I made the jump, went with her, and I've been freelancing to bring in some money while we, completed her career goals. Cedar Fair has remained a client of mine, which I'm very thankful for. And
yeah, that's cool.
But now we're in Boston, and we're here for the foreseeable future, and it's where we want to put down roots. And there's a lot of really interesting stuff here. There's a lot of biomedical companies. There's a lot of startups. There's a lot of technology stuff that I find really interesting. Mm-hmm. There's Harvard and some of the other greatest higher education institutions are here.
Yeah.
MIT.
There's a lot of robots there too.
Oh yeah. Yep.
A lot of robots happening there. That's where they're building those cyber killing robot dogs.
Yep, absolutely. So, and I find all that technology, futuristic stuff really interesting. And there's a strong marketing presence here as well. HubSpot is headquartered here. There's other marketing automation platforms that I've discovered since I've been here, like Klaviyo and other things. So as someone that finds marketing and advertising and storytelling interesting, this is a great place. It's also the home of WGBH, one of the pinnacles of public television, and a great champion of documentary filmmaking. So I'm excited for all those opportunities, and I'm checking them out and figuring out which one's going to be the best for me.
That's great, man. Well, for those listening or chiming in who have appreciated your story and like what you have to offer, how can they get in touch with you? How can they work with you? How do they get to your production company's site? How do they figure out a way to work with you?
Yeah, I think the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there, so just look up David Markey, Markey, and you'll see me hopefully popping up there.
Nice. Yeah, and I'll put the links in the show notes and that sort of thing. So, yeah, man, I can vouch for Dave. He's one of the good guys. Well, he's an Avenger. Let's be honest. He's an Avenger. He's trying to play coy as if he was only setting up the camera, but actually he was equipping Nick Fury with the tools for victory. He was giving a coaching session to the Avengers. Basically, you were coaching them on how to be awesome.
I was. And actually, so if you watch Winter Soldier, there's a crane shot when Nick Fury's trying to escape from the evil cops. And it starts close up on the wheel of his car, and then it pulls up 50 feet in the air. And I'm the guy that's hanging on the other end of the crane to pull it up and counterweight it up. So that's one of my claims to fame that I'm most proud of.
That is so great, man.
Human ballast.
I love hearing that. That's awesome, man. Well, dude, this has been so much fun, and I'm so glad we could make it happen. And I definitely want to have you back on the show. Again, if you guys are listening in, this is a really great read. Not only is it a quick read, but it's a great read. Todd Henry's Herding Tigers. It's all about leading creative teams. I think you'll walk away with some really good, tangible stuff. So thanks again for tuning in and listening to this episode. As always, we love it if you spread the word, share it on social, and have a conversation. Chime in. Let Dave know what you think about his thoughts, and we'll share some of those things on the weekly bookmark, which is an episode we post the off weeks. So again, those who are just tuning in, we post new episodes every other week. And then the weeks that we don't post episodes, we post a segment called the bookmark, which really takes a look back at the previous episode, a look forward at the next episode, and creates a little recap in a moment for some listener engagement. So that's really exciting and a lot of fun. Dave, this has been a blast, man. I really appreciate you, and I wish you nothing but the best in Boston. When COVID is over, I'll meet you out there, man. We'll go do the Boston stuff, drink some green beer, whatever it is they do up there.
Sounds good to me.
If that's good with you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sounds good to me. I am really glad we crossed paths long ago. I'm really glad that our boss at that company took a chance on a guy that knew iMovie. And I don't want to downplay how much I learned from you, because you've always been a guy that you just jump out there and do it. You're like, hey, we've got this client. I'm going to go shoot a concept and pitch it to him. And it's just like, what? Who gave you permission to do that? And
I've built a career on not asking for permission.
Exactly.
I still don't even know if I have permission to do this podcast. I'm just doing it, and somebody somewhere is okay.
Apologize
with it.
Later. That's another good creative tip. So.
Exactly. All right, man. Well, I'll talk to you. Best of luck out there. Congratulations on the engagement. Way to close the deal. Man, you're one of the best, dude. And we'll be in touch soon. All right.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you.
All right. Cheers, mate. Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, head over to iTunes or Spotify and give us a great rating and review. A Quick Read is a Leap Group podcast.